So it's lovely to see you today, and it's nice just to have a chat together about things generally. That's, isn't it? It's just
It
fun
is, yeah.
to chat together about, and maybe a bit of our how we came to all of this. So for you, when did you what was your youth like when you were a young man or a young guy and you went to school and so on? What was all that about, and how did that come to where we are now sitting here?
Well, when I was a kid, I grew up in a Catholic home. My mom and dad are raised me as Catholic. They're lovely. They're still together, and they raised us really good. They're good parents, and sent us
Yeah,
to elementary school and Catholic high school as well. So there was this big belief system, in the Catholic religion. I was one of the kids that was quite, how would you say it, quite good. Talk to Jesus, talk to Mother Mary, and prayed the Rosary, and was quite a good
yeah,
child.
well
And as
behaved.
yeah, and as time progressed, I think one of the questions,
Ah, yeah.
one of the questions that I asked my mom and dad was, "Why did you bring me here?" I think that was the
Mm,
start of the seeking. It's why
mm,
was I here?
yeah,
and
yeah.
and and I guess it progressed into spirituality,
Mm.
looking for meditation, read
And
all
were you
sorts of
doing that
books.
while you were still at school?
Um, this is when I was in my 20s. In my 20s, I'm
Right.
fast forwarding now. Yeah, in my 20s, there's you're questioning. There was quite in to listen to Eckhart at that time, and all of
Yeah.
this stuff that I used as an identity. Right, that's my identity now. I'm in the now, and you're not in the now. That kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
How about you, Tony? I heard that you grew up in a Catholic school as well.
Yeah, I did go to a Catholic school, and I quite fell in love with Jesus at one time there. I thought there was a lovely energy there. A lot of what he said sort of clicked for me. But later on, but I then moved away from that. Well, actually, a friend of mine recommended me to somebody called Gurdjieff Luspensky. Do you know Gurdjieff
I've
Luspensky?
heard, yeah, yeah.
And I followed that quite a lot. But after you, when you were 20 or so, were you still into the Catholic religion, or were you involved in that at all
No,
anymore?
no, not anymore. I think when I was 16, but like you, I was also in love with Jesus. I used to sing to him,
Oh,
and
did you?
when
Yeah,
I
I
was a little
didn't do
kid,
that. No. Yeah.
and I was and I was just one of
Oh,
those church kid, like the church boy that would ring the bell.
oh,
But
right. Okay.
but my first time doing it, I missed the signal of the priest, and I was fired quickly because I rang the bell too late, or
Well, I didn't have any of that. Yeah.
yeah.
But I was quite involved with the Catholic sort of approach to the whole thing. And I began to notice, well, this is even when I was younger, I felt this quite strongly, that there was something very contrary about it. It was all, in a way, dualistic. The Catholic religion is extremely dualistic as far as I'm concerned. And that's what I came across when I was at school, and that's what I felt there was something unbalanced about that. Did you feel that at all? Or
I did. There was this in loveness, with Jesus and all this kind of
mm,
stuff, but there were rules about that love.
mm,
It was a
mm.
segregated kind of way of doing it, very dualistic. To be able
Yeah.
to, I guess the innocence was just this loving, in loveness, and then
Mm,
when the knowing came about the world, I guess there was a falling, away from that, and
mm,
was seeking for some sort of liberation from that,
mm.
with all of this, got scared with the hell, and all that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
and and that belief
Yeah.
system, and question. I'm like, there must be, if this was created, maybe hell is also created.
Yeah, I had a problem with the Catholic thing about the devil and God, because were quite opposite and very dualistic again. And for me, I couldn't see how a God could be separate from the devil. That's what I felt, that somehow the devil had to be a creation of God if God was almighty. Why would he create something, or why would there be something in his reality which opposed him and fought him? So that was the beginning of a dichotomy for me. And that's why I liked somebody like Gurdjieff, those sort of people who didn't really recognize God in that sense. And they had a much cooler way of looking at life. Yeah. It's interesting because I went to Gurdjieff school in Surrey and started listening to lectures in there. But strangely enough, also at the very same time, the Gurdjieff school was taken over by somebody called Subud, who was an Indonesian guy, and he created a sort of very simple meditation. And he came to the Gurdjieff school, and everybody in the Gurdjieff school sort of then joined in this Subud thing. And I was involved in that for a couple of years. There was no rules, no instructions, just a very simple meditation which you could do there or at home. And what was interesting about that, again, rather like the devil and God, is that suddenly after 2 years, although what I liked about it was completely simple and direct, this guy from Indonesia suddenly started teaching and telling people whether they shouldn't wear tight trousers, and women should only wear dresses. And directly that started happening for me, I had to break away from it. There was something about that whole setup which for me didn't sit comfortably. Did you have anything like that going on?
I did. Mine was A Course in Miracles.
Right.
Yeah. I ended up, which was kind of like, I thought it was a breakaway. There was a period, maybe in my teens and early 20s, that I stopped believing in God.
Hmm. Oh,
Because
you stopped
stop
believing.
believing, yeah, or
Oh, right,
questioning
okay.
it, questioning, the questioning.
Yeah.
And then I came across A Course in Miracles, and there was not really a resonance, but there was almost a structure to it that
Hmm.
I wanted to follow,
Hmm.
but found it a little bit too religious as well. The words bothered me, and nothing really came out of it. But I did meditate for about 3 years, every day,
Yeah.
following
Yeah.
the Course in Miracles.
Yeah. As far as meditation was concerned, I was much more easygoing or even lazy about meditation. I was never a good seeker. I've never been a good seeker. Well, up until I wasn't a seeker anymore. But I was quite offhand about it all and was not at all disciplined. I couldn't. There was nothing in me that really wanted to be disciplined in that sense. I got the sense from you talking that you were quite rigid about following.
Yeah, I was quite being the eldest in a children of five. I had to be the example or something, so I was quite rigid. I was quite did it every day,
Oh,
um,
really?
and then at the towards the end of it, I ended up teaching meditation.
Right.
Yeah, when I had a glimpse, after
Mm,
meditating, and I saw everything as oneness or something, and I can't really
mm,
remember. That was a long time ago,
mm.
and I opened up a meditation center so people can meditate. So I was
Oh,
being
did you?
earnest.
Oh,
Yeah,
golly.
yeah, yeah. I was being earnest, really, really earnest about this
Mm,
meditation,
mm,
because I
mm.
wanted to have that image, that image or idea that I'm a holy
Yeah.
being,
Oh, right. How
which is
sweet.
yeah, which
Right.
is
Okay. Oh, right.
which
So
is
it's
the
quite a personal thing. You were
yeah,
possibly a holy being. Yeah.
not really a holy being, but something
Oh,
that there's like a soul or a spirit, that we're all soul, and
yeah.
this idea, which is basically an extension of the Catholic belief system, the Holy Spirit, all that kind of stuff. So the
Mm,
dream just became a different dream and a different dream
mm.
and a dream of specialness. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I sort of broke away from all that, and I was running a business, a building business, quite successfully. And for a few years, I was involved with that. And then later on, I went to something called Mind, Body, Spirit Festival in London. And when I went to the Mind, Body Festival in London, I suddenly came across Osho.
I
Osho.
heard about that. Yeah, I've heard that you were yeah.
And I was quite taken by that. And when I went to the actual place where they were talking about Osho, the people were selling books and all that sort of thing. I said to the guy there, what are his books like? And the guy running it said, I've no idea. I don't understand it at all. And I really liked, there was something about that that I liked. I liked the whole attitude of the Osho movement. In fact, it suited me in a way because it was lazier,
It
but it
sounded
was
like
still,
fun.
but it was also passionate. It was very passionate, but it was quite lazy and easygoing. And so I joined the Osho movement and actually lived in the commune for 3 years. I moved away completely from having a business and all of that sort of thing, a family, which was by then grown up anyway. And I was in the Osho commune in Cambridge for 3 years, and I really enjoyed that. But of course, Osho, as far as I'm concerned, is a teacher, and he was a teacher. And then suddenly, for me, that started to break down. That whole idea that you had to do it, and you had to be involved in this and that, and meditate, and it just again didn't suit me because I felt there was a dichotomy there, and so I moved away from all that. How about you?
I
Where did you go from there?
Well, I ended up, I was the same as you. I was in business, and I ended up giving up the business to be, to lead a spiritual life because that's what you think the progression is, right?
Uh,
To be, to live, in spirit or all that kind of stuff that,
uh,
ideas about that. So I ended up
mm,
doing meditation. I ended up teaching meditation to a lot of people.
mm,
And but what happened with that one was when I had a rigorous kind of meditation practice. I would wake up at 5 a.m.,
got
meditate
it.
for 2 hours,
Uh,
eat vegan food, and then did
oh
selfless
God,
service. Yeah, yeah, all of that.
the whole
So
thing.
trying to be a saint because now I
Yeah.
remember my mom was when I was growing up, my mom prayed to like maybe 100 saints, and maybe she wanted one
Oh,
of her
did
kids.
she?
She
Oh,
did.
did she?
Yeah.
Ah, so that
In the
influence was
Catholic,
there.
that influenced me. Yeah. So I said maybe if I help people from the streets, people like at-risk homeless youth, people with addiction, so I would bring them to meditation. I was being earnest about this. I really wanted to help people. But when
Mm.
my mom, about this, my mom had was diagnosed with brain cancer, and there was a falling apart. There was I
Oh,
could not handle it, right? So all my
oh,
meditation could not. I'm like, how come I'm not happy anymore? And then
oh.
at one point, I think I was meditating for maybe 3 hours, and this thought came to my mind. I said, I really just want to have a pint of beer and grieve.
I like it.
So I said, I don't think
Oh,
that there's a difference between, meditating for 3 hours or drinking at a pub. So I
no,
crossed the street and I ended up drinking beer. And then
very
I
wise.
felt really bad about it afterwards, because of that guilt trip, right? Of
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah, yeah, the guilt trip of
the evil,
spirituality.
the evil of
Yeah.
alcohol.
And then what do people see me drinking, all that kind of stuff. And then I went
Ah,
back into it.
wow.
So I started living a double life. Here I was a meditation teacher, and at nights I would go to pubs.
Oh, I like the idea of that. Yeah.
And then I thought that I lost my enlightenment because I thought I had it, right?
Mm.
So I
Oh, did
started,
you? Oh,
yeah,
so
yeah,
you
yeah.
actually thought you were,
I
oh.
thought I did, yeah, because there was this glimpse, and I started teaching and I
Mm.
left my business and all that kind of stuff, that silly people do when, when they encounter this glimpse, right? And so I was desperate to get it back. So I started researching consciousness, awareness, and then I ended up on non-duality. So every
Oh,
book that was about consciousness or awareness by Nisargadatta and all these other people, I would devour, right? So
okay.
I became a rabid, desperate seeker because I wanted to get
Yeah.
that identity back of an enlightened person, an enlightened being.
Mm. Mm.
Although I know that it was fraudulent, I kept on going. I kept on going. So
No.
so I would be teaching and I'll be drinking at night and partying and dancing,
Oh,
and then
really?
yeah. And then what happened is I encountered Richard Sylvester's book
Oh, I hope
called
you do.
I Hope You Die Soon. And there was a death wish here, right? There's a death wish here. And I was getting really depressed and living this dual life. And I told everybody that what I'm teaching is a fraud now and all this kind of stuff. Um, I read that book and I heard about you, and I'm like, well, you know what? Here's this Tony Parsons. So I'm one of those people that wants results.
All
This
right,
character,
okay.
this
Oh,
character wants results, right? And I'm like, well,
oh,
if I'm going to listen, I'm like, I researched, all of this. I'm not going to mention the teacher's name, all of these teachers'
no,
names, but they don't have anyone speaking, about their communication. So I discovered you, and I discovered a whole bunch of many different speakers that are speaking in this open secret communication, and I was like, okay, this is it. And I think the first time I heard you speak on YouTube, there was I can't describe the feeling. There was kind of like a resonance, but I didn't know what it was. But there was
okay.
a lot of fear also happening. There was a lot of
Oh,
anger. There's a lot of anger.
right.
It's kind of like someone threw a cold water on me, and I didn't like it. There was a resistance right away, and I'm like, "What is this guy talking about?" But there was a
Right.
magnetism towards it. I don't know what was
Mm.
happening, because after listening to them, I'm like, "Well, I have to listen to the other talks now." Until I probably listened to maybe about 20 videos of yours, and 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 it was really difficult because here I was coming from a lineage, because I was spiritual,
Mm. The
having
whole
all of
structure into something completely.
oh, it was just, and I hated you at one point, Tony, because
Mm.
you were talking about something that really challenged everything. And then during that time, I was falling apart as a spiritual teacher, and I was drinking more now, you know what I'm saying, and having fun and DJing now, you know what I'm saying, and
All
then
right.
I had a, what do you call, a canceled teacher, you know what I'm saying. I fell apart, and I moved to a small island, and still listening to you, but really frustrated because I kept on saying this: I will never get this.
No,
I will
no,
never get this.
no.
And then with that, looking back with that statement now, that is a great statement because no
Yeah,
one,
amazing.
no,
Amazing.
no one
Yeah.
ever get this. So I think there was a giving up of some sort, but there was an openness to this communication. So I
Mm.
was DJing for about 4 hours, was just playing music, and then I was just sitting down in a chair, and no one was there. It's just sitting down. Then saw a dust. Everything looked as it is. Nothing was missing. Everything was in perfect place. And I said, wow, this is it. And there was almost kind of like, not a
Mm.
disappointment, but like, this is it.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Something that has never been lost. But let's go
Mm.
back to you, because let's go back
Yeah,
to you
yeah.
with Osho. What happened with Osho with you?
Oh no, with the Osho thing, I near the end, there was an ending to it. I just saw that it was just another chase for an answer in some way or other, and that he was directing people in a certain way to get to somewhere called enlightenment. So I moved away from all that and came and lived near here actually, in Wiltshire, and came and lived. And Claire also came. I'd known Claire for some years before that as a friend, and she came up and was nearby, and we came together, and then we lived. Then we lived together in Wiltshire, and out of that came the Open Secret book. And when the Open Secret book came, we were actually in publishing. We were running a publishing business, and we put the Open Secret in there, obviously to sell it. And then after a few months, somebody invited me to go and speak to them. I'd never spoken to anybody about anything like that. And I went to I went to Dulwich in London, which is a suburb of London, and there were 5 people there. And I talked to them about the Open Secret. And in a sort of way, as I started talking to them about the Open Secret, I sort of recognized something in myself which had always been there. That's all I can say about communicating this. And then, so that happened. And then they invited me to a house nearby. This snowballed because they invited me to a house nearby, and there were 35 people in the house. And then I was invited to another house, and there were 45 people. And then the whole thing just grew and grew and grew. And we were together running in a way a magazine, but we were also getting books published. We were traveling to America. I was talking to in America about all of this. and talking in Europe generally about the whole thing had suddenly snowballed. But one realization I had in the early days was I was the only person that I knew of, I have to say, that was speaking in this unequivocal, uncompromising way about what is called non-duality, although there is no such thing. And I recognized that this was happening, and I was getting quite a big audience because, in a way, what I was saying was completely unique. As you said, you came across it, and other people absolutely hated it and also loved it. So there was all this going on for some years, and I knew of nobody else that was communicating in this very direct, simple way. But then after a while, I was running retreats in America and in Europe and in England. And out of these retreats came 2 or 3 people who then wanted to communicate. And we talked together, and I obviously helped them as much as I could. And they started communicating in the same way, in their own unique characteristic way. But it was lovely to see other people talking about it for the first time. And then, more recently, I've watched this thing explode into now what? There's probably a dozen people, or maybe 10 or a dozen people I know who are speaking, let's be clear about this, who are speaking in this completely uncompromising, clear way. There are dozens and dozens of people talking about non-duality, and they have no idea what they're talking about, or they're very confused about it. They have their own ideas, which have nothing to do with for instance, what we're talking about, the Om secret and so on. And so really that brings me up to where we are today. Claire and I now live in a house near where we were together before. And we're doing all this. We gave up the publishing business. We had to give it up because the talks were too busy all over the world, really. And in the end, we didn't go to America anymore because we were so busy in Europe talking. And what you see today is that. But the wonderful thing I have to say about it was that there are now other people confirming this, other people that this is, or you could say that this had happened to, although it doesn't happen, that were also communicating this in their own way. So that it's an absolute joy to me now to see what's coming out of this. Have I missed anything?
Well, there's no one here, but there's this gratefulness coming out, with this communication. It's just something that it's just coming out, this joyfulness and aliveness in speaking about this. And then when I was seeking, I must have, did not leave any stones, unturned in terms of all like non-duality and all this stuff, Advaita Vedanta, all of the teachers. I must have read like 100 or maybe 500 books about it.
Really?
Just
really?
nonstop.
Yeah.
And then when I encountered not yours, but the Open Secret, it was almost kind of like going to the last house on the block, as someone would explain it.
Yeah.
And there was no one there.
No.
And
really?
then
No.
And it's just, I think this communication has never been around. There's no time, but in the apparent timeline, it's only this revolutionary communication has only been around for 30 years.
Yeah.
The same time that you started speaking about this, because I can't find anyone. And that, I used to write quotes, I used to listen to a lot of the apparent enlightened, beings and everything that I aspired to be. And I would write all of these quotes, and I would read these quotes in my lectures or whatever. After encountering this communication, I looked at that quote book, and I basically saw that it was just writings about, it's like Santa Claus wrote it. It just became. So I ended up throwing away the book, and I was like, "What now? What now?" Because this, you never know.
Because it generates its own energy. It generates its own energy, and Claire and I were going to all sorts of places all over the world, talking in this way, and it does generate its own energy. And Claire, essentially, it was really lovely actually, because I was saying all these things which were in some ways awful, disappointing for a lot of people. And Claire, it was rather sweet because Claire was picking up the pieces of people and talking to them in a very much gentler, one-to-one way. So it was a lovely mixture actually we had and still do have, except obviously in the last couple of years, we haven't been able to do a live workshop of any kind. We've got our eyes on the idea of doing that next year. But no, it was an amazing adventure. Amazing adventure.
I heard you're quite the killer with killer looks.
Yeah, killer. In Amsterdam, I'm called the Terminator. The Terminator.
I've heard that too.
So it's been lovely, and here we are. I have to say, like you, I had an interest in scientific discovery, especially about some recent discovery of something called nothing, and also in neuroscience and neurobiology, where people talked about the possibility that there was no individual, no free will and choice, and all of that. But for me, when I've watched those people up until fairly recently, I do, from my side, I find that they compromise quite a lot with what they're saying. Because, for instance, other people are recommending that his followers or whatever they are do meditation, follow mindfulness, and do all of that sort of thing. And if you watch those people, they're actually still, in a way, teaching people how to live in a full way. So for me, there's some sort of contradiction there. And I don't take a lot of notice of neuroscientists and those sort of people. But I do think it opened up for a lot of ordinary people another world, another possibility. So I think in the last few years, and I've tried to say this about this work that I do and other people do, that essentially this is nothing to do with any of us as people, but it's to do with something energetic.
I agree.
There's something energetic that's happening very powerfully at the moment in the world.
I agree. I told you the story earlier about my friend that has not heard about me for quite a while, and he wanted to just catch up, go to a pub, drink a couple of beers, and he asked me, what are you up to these days? Of course, during that time, there was this passion coming out to share this. I didn't know who to talk to about this. It was just kind of like, so I talked for maybe a couple of hours, maybe a few pints of beer, and then he went to the washroom and he came back and he said, I just threw up. And I'm like, what's going on? He said, there's never been anyone here.
All right. Okay.
So he never even heard, never meditated.
No, but
suddenly. And then he has this, he gave me a whole bunch of books to read. I've read maybe a few of them about, neuroscience, catching up to this communication. It will never catch up because there's nothing to catch up to. About that there's no self, no consciousness, and of course no free will. And there's several books that have come out in the past 5 years about that. Quite fascinating. But
I still somehow sense when I watch these people that there's still a sense there that they feel there is a sort of center in the body, or there's not an individual, but there's some sort of energy in the body which they're speaking to, and in some way or other they're trying to help people have a quieter life or be more meditative. And for me, most of the people I watch in that dualistic, in that neuroscientific way, are still coming from a dualistic
They're speaking to an audience. It's kind of like when there's a teacher that's speaking to someone.
They're trying to help.
They're trying to help.
They're trying to help people.
Trying to explain something that can't be explained. So they're trying to come to a location or trying to come to a conclusion. And I think it's what I'm noticing with a lot of the neuroscience. And now that you touched upon that, there's when I was interviewing a lot of people in regards to non-duality, I had no idea that there were so many different, I'm not going to name names, so many different teachers about this. And it was quite shocking to me. I had no idea because some people that would call it non-duality, but everything that they talk about is dualistic.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people that, that teach meditations which will take you to the state of non-duality. I've never heard of anything so, well, opposite as that. It's amazing how many people there are out there. For me, I, I'm very safe in saying, for me, there's a handful of people in the world who are coming straight out of this very clear, radical, uncompromising non-duality, and you can virtually tell right away whether they are or not. You can see it or you can hear it. Very few people, very few.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I've noticed too. Very, very few people speak about this when the communication is being expressed.
mm,
I can tell when someone is trying to come
mm,
from a trying to teach a personalized version of this,
mm, mm, mm.
because
And
this
trying
is
to work it
impersonal.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're trying to work it out and they're trying to explain it. There's a lot of people who still go into explanation about it in a way that for me is still a path orientated energy, as though they're trying to lead other people and themselves into somewhere. Yeah, I feel that quite a lot. It's quite a temptation to do that.
and
It's
and
very, it's very lovely to watch people, especially young people these days, who are communicating this and are not trying to get anywhere at all. And they make the most outrageous statements, which would leave any seeker collapsed on the floor because there's nothing to get hold of. It's gorgeous. I love it.
I agree. There's actually so many speakers that have reached out to me now that are not quite out there, but speaks really clearly about this, and it's
Mm,
quite fascinating just to see this
mm,
grow in
mm.
a way that I've never um, you know so many. There's I don't want to name names, but
No, no,
there's a
no.
lot of younger people right now that are speaking clearly about this with so much passion and aliveness as well. I shared
Mm.
this story with you when I started sharing this in a live audience. A bunch of people walked out, Tony.
Oh, really? Oh, how lovely. That's amazing. When I first started talking, I always remember the story when these people from Dulwich, the 5 people invited me to go to a house. I went into this house to talk, and I sat on a chair, and a Buddhist in full Buddhist regalia with everything came and sat right next to me right at the beginning. And I gave my introductory talk saying there is no one, there's nothing, there's no one to see. And when I'd finished my introduction, he stood up with great, noise and strode or marched out of the room. It was a real performance. And somebody, when he'd gone out, somebody said to me, "What do you feel about this Buddhist guy walking out?" And I said, "Well, it's one of the best compliments I've had ever." So that's interesting that a lot of people walked out. I
And the
do, I do find some people get quite angry. Not so much more recently. Some people do get angry about it and try to attack it, but it's difficult to attack in a way because there's nothing to get hold of. Mm.
and just a lot of confusion. It's almost like the rug is being pulled under their feet over and
Yeah.
over and over again. It's
Mm.
just an unbelievable. Live meetings are quite different from Zoom, but
Yeah, yeah.
I
Oh,
like
yeah.
the Zoom too. The Zoom is quite
I do.
great
I think
too.
the Zoom's all right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's okay in its way.
yeah.
But being with somebody live in the room for me is very, very, very different to even seeing them on a screen. Although you can get a sense of what's going on the screen, there's something about the close energy of someone that's very readable, as far as I'm concerned. Do you feel that? Or?
I do, yeah, I do.
Mm,
Especially when you see faces,
mm,
looking. Of course, there's no one, just faces looking around, and the interaction and the discomfort sometimes,
yeah,
So- or the big gaping mouth, like the wow look, kind of like they don't know what
yeah.
hit them, or someone trying to leave, looking at the door back and forth. Should I leave now? or, or
Oh,
someone thinking that I wasted my time, and there's people that are just completely looking at it, kind of like, what is being said here? Everything that all of the belief, it's like an unraveling.
Mm.
It's like
The other thing I do find fascinating is how the mind, the seeking mind, will go on trying to find any way of not finding this, any way of avoiding this, any way of devaluing it in some way or other. For me, I see in people a very strong survival mechanism, which is about I'm going to survive. Me, the me is going to survive this regardless. And I do say, and I still feel people come to the meetings, and a lot of people will open to this, but there are people who will also protect themselves and entrench themselves in their own belief systems more and more. And some people, you can say to some people, there is no one or there is no choice, and they still go on and on, insisting that there is. It's
I see
very,
that too.
very strong energy. Yeah.
There's an apparent openness happening, especially like on the second or the third day of this meeting, because the me is getting pummeled. It's like the me
Mm,
is seeing that there's no escape to this.
mm,
There's no
mm,
escaping this,
mm,
and it's trying to escape, trying to look around,
mm,
but it's just really fascinating. It's really fascinating the
mm.
reaction to this. It's a mixed
Oh
reaction.
yeah.
It doesn't have any agenda, so it's not to please anyone whatsoever.
No, no. It's
Yeah.
not trying to get anywhere. That's the
No.
frustrating thing. That's for a lot of people, that's awful because the whole idea of their energy is to find something.
But sometimes there's this seeker that they have this understanding now that there's no me, and it becomes another knowing. There's
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see that too sometimes with people that
Oh,
comes back?
definitely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and it
A lot.
becomes
Quite a lot. Yeah.
and also that there's this criticism about this, that if there's no one there, then it's in denial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
Yeah.
that, because you know what, a lot of people ask me that question. I want to hear from you what you would say about that. That it's a
About
denial, that it's a you know being no one there is a denial or a bypassing, or um what's the other word that they use, an avoidance.
well, I don't. I as far as I'm concerned, I see clearly for me that those people are trying to, as a me, are trying to survive as a me. And my one response nearly always to that is if somebody makes that sort of comment about this, that this is there's something wrong with this, or they feel it's an avoidance. And I always say, well, if that's what you believe, then that's what's happening. I always love that thing. The one thing I try to say to more to people, all there is no thing apparently happening. And every response that comes out from people is no thing apparently happening. And if it's a negative response, which tries to attack this message, then it's the same thing. It's not right or wrong. It's just the energy that's arising in that body is what's happening, and that's their belief system. And I sometimes say to people which they don't like, "Thank you very much for sharing your belief."
Well,
It's
I am witness. I have hosted your virtual retreats, residentials, online residentials, and in
uh,
between there's a breakout room, and
uh,
um, and then I usually get a couple of messages, in between, people either crying or hysterical about this communication, and I remember that Claire, used to go after you. You have put out the machine gun, Tony, and.
I know she did. She put them
Yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah.
But I don't think she puts. Well, I'm clear that she doesn't put them together in any sort of compromising way. She doesn't compromise at all. But in a way, her energy is much more. Well, it's much more healing. Oh no, it's warm. I don't know. It's a different
Yeah,
energy.
yeah.
Just a
so
different energy.
so yeah, so when in between your talks, there are people usually that are completely, especially people that are coming from spirituality,
Mm.
that have a lot of held on to. So they'll message me and they say, "Can I talk to you for a few moments?" And they're having kind of like a feeling of losing themselves, and they're
Really? Yeah.
holding on desperately, and they're
Yeah.
crying, and they usually say, "I don't know what's going on," and do you want some comfort?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I always, on weekday mornings, I'm available on the telephone if people want to speak. And I have quite a lot of interesting conversations on the telephone with people who've never met me and have read the book or books, or people who have been to meetings and want to clear up something. It's very enjoyable. I love it. And there are people who do phone up who want to attack it and devalue it in
Oh,
some.
really?
Oh
Really?
yeah, oh yeah. I'm
Yeah.
glad they are there.
Yeah.
I like all that energy. It's nice.
I heard before that when this, from various speakers, that there was a lot of hostility, speaking about this. I remember a couple of speakers telling me that when they used to speak about this, that there's almost a fight about to break in a room.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have anything like that?
In the early days when I was on my own, I think I was attacked more than I was later on. I don't know. Yeah, I think in the early days, not hugely, but there was that people were trying to devalue it or fight it or whatever you like to call it in the early days. Strangely enough, in the last few years, since being surrounded by other people that are backing this as well, or are talking about this, that attack doesn't seem to be so relevant, or there's not so much of an attack going on. So what was in the early days. Yeah.
I heard that there was this hostility, and now you know what? When I speak to, I want to go back into when we did the Nothing conference. That half of the people that were there, or more than half, had their first glimpse or their apparent awakening listening to you. There's
Oh,
so
really?
many people, speakers
Really?
that even some teachers that are teaching different stuff, they
Mm.
always credit, Tony Parsons. So to me, seems to be kind of like in a timeline. There's no time in the history of this that there was a significant change in the communication, and
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
the communication prior to this communication almost gets obliterated. It's almost
yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
almost like irrelevant because when this apparent
Yeah.
communication came, it was
Mm.
just so sharp.
Oh,
It's just wow.
it's the end of everything.
This is the
It
wow
is the end of
communication.
everything.
Yeah, it's the what do you call it? The Armageddon.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And talking about Armageddon, what do you think about the world we live in? The
It's
story of the
changed
world and everything that's going on. What's your actual feeling about all
in the history of this. Something has changed. Something can never go back to what it was.
that? No,
There seemed
no.
to be a division that's apparently happening, a major division of
Mm,
this and that, and a separateness. And
mm,
there's also a fighting with authority, and
yeah,
there's something that is apparently emerging, in this
yeah,
storyline that
yeah.
can never go back to what it was.
No,
Yeah.
no.
How about you, Tony? What do you think of it?
Well, I think there's been a huge opening and realization that we are not in control. I think it's been a real shock to people who believe they are in control or even in a modicum of control. In some, people are recognizing that there is no control or there is very little control. And that for many individuals, separate individuals, is quite a shock. I think it's been a major shock in that sense and a movement in that sense towards something more free. But I think the apparent world we live in is full of fear and anger. To me, the world's been angry for many years, but it's somehow getting angrier and angrier. Wherever you go in the world now, there seems to be some sort of upheaval or dispute, or people are out walking on the streets and sitting on the road and blocking the streets all over the world. There's huge upsurge of people wanting to make some sort of statement, whatever it's near negative or positive, although there is no such thing. You know what I mean? People
That's
want to say something.
that's
And
a
there's
very
also
powerful.
a huge energy about conspiracy. I know a few of my friends, or a couple of my friends, who feel there is a conspiring in all sorts of fields in the world, especially in the pharmaceutical world. There's some sort of theory that the pharmaceutical world want to encourage people having jabs, and so they're possibly discouraging these cures that are coming up for COVID. That's a conspiracy theory, which I'm hearing from several people. I think there's a lot of that going on. A lot of people are worried or concerned about that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great observation because yeah, it's just this noticing of all of this, anger, energy, and frustration, and realizing that there's no one in control, that the
I
lack of
think it's the same.
control. So with all of this observation, with the situation with the COVID and the global climate thing, how do you think this is there an openness that's happening? There's an arising of openness to this communication.
Oh, no question. Sure.
Yeah.
I think it's been going on for 20 or 30 years, actually. And with science the way it is, and neuroscience the way it is, I've said the other day in my vision talk, I do think there are people who are they don't even know it themselves, but they're opening up to what we're talking about. They're opening up to something that's absolutely beyond religious endeavor. And that's happening quite a lot. I think that's very exciting. I think it's amazing how all this has happened and come together with a way, a new opening to something called non-duality. I think that's very exciting.
Totally, I see that when I was speaking, I realized that there were two sides of the camp, either people believers or non-believers of COVID or whatever, but they were all listening to this. Yeah, there's no division, when people come and listen to this communication, and it's quite fascinating. They bring up all of this stuff, and it's seen as just an arising, nothing's happening.
I think the great in a way, one of the things that I see with all of this is a complete and utter confusion about the word non-duality, about what it is. There's a huge raft of people out there who actually think non-duality is something which you can achieve. They believe it's a state, something that you can learn about and achieve. As far as I'm concerned, non-duality is just a term pointing to nothing.
Yeah.
Empty fullness.
Empty fullness. That's
the formless form.
That's it.
all it is. It's just non-duality is the formless form. Empty fullness. Nothing at all. Nothing and everything. It's not a thing that can be taken up and learned.
That's it.
A lot of
That's
people
it.
believe
Yeah.
it is.
I just got a Zoom from someone earlier today that was getting these sessions from an apparent, I'm not going to name names, but an apparent non-duality teacher that is offering sessions about clarity. And
yeah. Well, there's outrageous comments made about non-duality. It's outrageous. Yeah.
As if it's somewhere to get to, or someone will get there.
No question.
Yeah.
There's no question for a lot of people that it is a something.
Or it's something that can be learned, or they made non-duality into something that is
it's a state that can be experienced. There is somebody or a couple of people on YouTube who actually are offering to help you have an experience of non-duality. There couldn't be anything more opposite the idea.
That sounds really strange to me right now.
Can be experienced by you. It's so sweet.
For only £1,000.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. I had no idea, coming into, because I did not really was in any group or anything like that. I came into this really from exile, just listening to you, and then I didn't have any social media, and then encountering all of these different, speakers. For example, I was, I'm being cheeky here now. I was talking to a teacher. And then this teacher looked into my eyes as if trying to hypnotize me or trying to meditate, or trying to get into that Advaita glare. And I burst out laughing because I could not, it was just so absurd. And this teacher thought that I had a glimpse.
Oh, really? Because you laughed. Oh,
I just couldn't take it. I just couldn't take it.
no.
There's nothing wrong or right about this. It's I see some of these teachers are being earnest with what they're doing,
Mm.
but it's
Oh,
not
yeah,
what's
of course
being
they are.
talked about.
Oh, of course they are.
Yeah. Completely
No question
different.
about it.
Completely different. It's like a
Mm.
different language almost that they're
Oh,
speaking.
totally. Yeah, they don't join together at all. I
As
think
if
that's
there's anyone to hypnotize.
right.
As if there's anyone to hypnotize or to meditate. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like,
Yeah.
well, Tony,
Okay,
this
good.
is great.
If we want to talk any more, we can always do a bit more. But I think that's we've
This is good for
it's
now. Yeah,
quite rounded what
it
we've talked.
is. I enjoyed it very much.